All right, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining me. We'll go ahead and get started here. If you got your questions, go ahead and post them. Should be below the video if you're on a smart screen, or to the right of the video if you're on a larger screen. So I had a question the other day I thought I would answer, or I had a question that was submitted. It's not in the chat, but somebody submitted to me, so I thought I would answer that starting out, asking, when you're looking at, Clay talks about being in the slot sometimes, and sometimes it refers to the club running down a forearm to being in the slot. So let me explain exactly what that is. This isn't my favorite. I actually have a better way of kind of looking at whether you're in the slot or not. So I'll explain that as well. But when Clay is talking about that, what he's talking about is the club kind of running down the trail forearm. So if I can see if I can try to get that. So you can see how the club is kind of working down my trail forearm. That's often referred to as the slot. Some people may call that. It's not my favorite because it can be cheated a little bit, right? So if you're, and also it's not as obvious sometimes. So sometimes, if you're someone who kind of stands up out of your posture, where you can get that club to run through your forearm, and it can look maybe like it's going down your forearm, but it's not necessarily going to be in the slot. That doesn't necessarily mean you're bringing the club down in the correct way. So I think the best way to look at if you're bringing that club down in the slot or in a nice place, or the way that we see the best players do it, is to use the elbow plane line. And whenever you're looking at anything on video, you're analyzing anything on video, the camera angle is really important. And those of you who are frequenters in the office hours know I'm kind of a stickler on it. And the reason why I'm a stickler on it is because it's very important. If you are, and I'll demonstrate that for you here real quick. So let's just go over the correct down the line camera angle first, and then I'll show you why it's important that the camera angle is correct. If it's a little bit off, it's going to give you bad information, right? It can make it look like you're in a better spot than what you actually are, and vice versa. So that's why it's really, really important. So how I would recommend setting up the down the line camera angle, and that down the line camera angle, for those of you who aren't familiar, that's the camera angle would be this. If I was set up like this, basically the camera is behind me working in. This would be face on. This would be down the line. These are primarily the two camera angles that you're going to use. You may use other camera angles to look at different things, but typically those are the two camera angles that you're going to use. But the downline camera angle is by far the one that people get wrong the most setting it up. And I only know that because I get a lot of videos sent to me from students, and a lot of people just not quite getting it right. But if you follow these steps, it's very easy. First time you do it, you might have to think it through, but after that, it's gonna be totally easy, right? So what I do is I take a club or an alignment stick and line it up with the target. Now, when I line it up with the target, very easy thing to do, set it on the ground. I like to use a club and kind of hold it out in front of me and kind of line up. Okay, line this up with the alignment stick, and then I'm going to look and see if that's lined up with the target out in the distance. So I'm going to close one eye and kind of look at that, and then I'll adjust it. I'll move it if I need to move it, right? If it's not quite set up correctly. So once you have your camera lined up with a target, your intended target, now what you're going to do is you're going to take your camera and you're going to line that up directly with your alignment stick, right? So as if there's a laser coming out of the camera, it's going to be shooting right down that alignment stick. If you've ever used like those laser levels, imagine there's a laser level on that camera, and that laser is right on top of that alignment stick, right? So that's number one. We want to have it there. Number two is we want to set it up at about hip level. I highly recommend that you use, it's almost a requirement, I would say, to use something to hold the camera. Don't hold the camera yourself. Don't have your buddy hold the camera, because one, it's going to be wobbly, and two, your friend's probably not going to hold it in the right spot and at the right height. Whenever somebody takes a video of somebody, I always see them hold it like this. They hold it right in front of them like this. This is too high of an angle. I don't see people like this, right, holding the camera like that. Now, if you see me, at the clinics, I don't bring the tripod out there. So when I'm recording video, I have the camera down like this to make sure that I have the right angle. Now, I try to hold myself as steady as possible, but But yeah, I mean, I'm not looking at their planes or anything like that, so it's not as big of a deal. But if you're looking at the the shallowing, you're looking at that, it's very important that the camera is still, because if you move it around a little bit, it's going to make it look a little bit off, right? So again, hip level. Use a tripod that holds. Your phone's really the best thing these days to record your swing. You can go on Amazon and search phone tripod mount or tripod with phone mount. You can get something for under 20 bucks. If you already have a tripod, you can just buy the mount, and those are usually under 10 bucks. 10 bucks or under typically. You can get more expensive ones, but there's definitely some cheap options that just work just fine. I've had a couple of them, right? So the last piece is that we want to have the camera far away enough to where you and the club stay in the frame. Now, technically, the camera angle that I have here, it's too high. It's too close, right? If you look here, my foot's already out of the frame. When I bring the club up, the club goes out of frame. So it would be at. So all you have to remember is get it set up down your toe line. So that's the last piece. Sorry. So when you go to set up to the shot, you're going to make sure that your toes are up there close to that stick, right? And then you're going to set up the ball from there. So once you get your feet kind of set up, you're going to move the ball to where it's pretty close to where you need, and then you can kind of readjust. But you want to have your feet within an inch or two of that stick, the tips of your toes, right? You don't want to have it like this. You don't want to have it like this, like this. Basically, if you draw a vertical line on the screen, assuming you have the camera set up vertically up and down, if you draw a vertical line on your swing, that line should be able to go from your front toe to your back toe, right? That's a way that you can kind of check that. Right. So again, we want to have it set up down the toe line, hip level, far away enough to where you and the club stay in the frame. Very, very simple. It's all you got to do. Once you do it once, it's pretty easy. And actually, when you set it up for the camera to get it far away enough, I would actually kind of pace it off. So that way you can know, okay, it's 5 paces, and then I can just put the camera there. And then I know every time I'm far away enough to where the club, and myself stay in the frame throughout the entire swing. Once we've done that, once we've got the camera set up correctly, and we are set up to the alignment stick correctly here, what we're going to do is when we record our swing, we're analyzing it, we're going to draw a line from the ball up to the middle of the elbow. This is what's referred to as the elbow plane line. And I actually think this is better to look at how the club is coming down versus trying to look at going through your arm, because you can put your arm in all kinds of different places, and it's not as foolproof. Because you can get the club to kind of work through the arm, but it's not going to be actually going, through it like we want it to. So it can kind of fool you a little bit, and we want it to be more obvious whether you're in the slot or not, right? So what you want to look at with the elbow plane line is you want to see that club getting underneath that elbow plane line and then tracking just underneath it all the way down to the ball, right? The sooner it's underneath that elbow plane line, the better, right? Now, if it starts out above it and then gets under it late, that's not ideal, but that's still better than being over it the whole way. If we're over it the whole way, that means you're steep, right? If you're over it first and then under it late, that probably means that you're standing up out of your posture, or you're pushing your hands out, or something like that. You're reacting to, a lot of times that's a big thing that I see. People get way across the line, and then when they start their downswing, they push their hands out. Well, in the beginning of the swing, their club's like this. Well, the club would be above the elbow plane line here, but then a few moments later, it's underneath, right? That's not an ideal way to hit the ball. You can hit good shots doing that, but you're going to be less consistent if you're doing that. So if we can get that club underneath the elbow plane line as it's coming down, the sooner the better. And if we can keep it underneath that elbow plane line, that'd be great. Sometimes you'll see people, they have it underneath, they'll have it really laid off, and then they'll kind of pull on the club, and then it gets over it, right? That we don't want that either, right? So we want it to get underneath that elbow plane line and tracking underneath it all the way down, just underneath it. It's going to be like either just underneath it or a club head underneath it. So there'd be like a club head of space between the club head and the line. If we set up the camera right, you're going to be able to tell that right away. So that's going to tell you whether you're shallowing out the club or not. All right, let's keep going. All right, so PO or PAO, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that. It says video shows on rolling club open with forearms and faces open at P4. For those of you who aren't familiar, when we talk about P's in the swing. That's P is short for position. So I'll just go over that real quick for those of you who don't know. So P1 is address. P2 is club parallel. P3 is lead arm parallel. P4 is the top. P5 is lead arm parallel downswing. P6 is club parallel downswing. P7 is impact. P8 is club parallel in the follow through. P9 is trail arm parallel and follow through, or arms parallel and follow through. And then P10 is the finish position. So for those of you who aren't familiar with what those positions are, it just goes from address, club parallel, arm parallel, top, arm parallel, club parallel, impact, arm parallel, or club parallel, arm parallel, finish. It's basically what the positions are. So he's saying the face is open at P4. So yes and no. The face technically isn't anything at P4 because you're not hitting the ball at P4. So it's not really anything at P4. So you have to be a little bit careful with that. But the position that I like to see the club at P4 is typically I like to see if we look at the leading edge of the club, I like to see that leading edge a little bit shut to the forearm. That's usually a good position to be, right? But where the face is, it only really matters at impact. But generally, when you look at the best players, that's typically where they're going to be. If you have the face open to your forearm, right, you're going to have to do. Now you can have the face open to your forearm here, but you're going to have to do something to get that face closed. Get the face less open, so that way you can come into impact with a square face. Because if you have a really open face at the top, you may tend to have a more open face at the bottom. So it's not the worst thing in the world if you're open at P4. I would pay attention to what's happening at P7, impact, and then look at what's happening in the swing that could be leading to that. So I think I'm not saying that this is what you're doing, but I think a big mistake that a lot of people make is they don't think about what's actually happening between their club and the ball, right? They don't think about how the club's coming down into impact. They're looking at their takeaway. They're looking at their top of the swing. They're looking at, all these different things when you don't necessarily need to be doing that. You need to look at what's happening at impact and then look at, okay, well, how am I getting to that impact position? So if you're struggling, so for example, let's say that you're slicing the ball and then you look on video and you see at the top, P4 as P.O. was talking about, in that club face, let's say you have the wrist really cupped and that club face is open to my forearm. Well, if we got that club face or that lead wrist more flat and we got that club face, close to my forearm a little bit, that might get rid of the slice. It doesn't necessarily will. It just means I may be able to more easily come into impact with a more square club face. So that's what we have to look at. So at P6, he says bowed wrist. So P6 is going to be that club parallel position. So he's saying at P6, he's seeing some bow in that lead wrist. That's a good position to be in. A lot of it depends on your grip. That's what we also have to keep in mind. A lot of people have this mindset that we got to bow the wrist, got to bow the wrist, got to bow the wrist. And we're seeing a lot of the best players bowing their wrist. But a bowed wrist, you got to talk about matchups, right? So a bowed wrist is going to go with a weak grip, right? So almost any player that has a bowed wrist in their swing also has a weak grip. So examples would be like Colin Morikawa. If you look at Colin Morikawa's grip, he's like this. He's very weak with his grip. His thumb is going straight down the top of the shaft like that. The back of his hand, or his hand's more on the side of the grip, right? And at the top of the swing, he's like this. And as he's coming into impact, he's like that. He needs to have it like that to get the club face closed because his grip is weak. Now, an anomaly would be like Dustin Johnson. Dustin Johnson bows his wrist a lot, does not have a weak grip, but he actually undoes the bow as he's coming down. He has a little bit of bow in his wrist at impact with a neutral grip, but he has a ton of shaft lean. Most players aren't even going to be able to work with the kind of shaft lean that he has because he has enough club head speed to support that, right? And he also hits fades, which means he adds loft. When you hit a fade, you're opening the face to the path, and when you open the face to the path, that adds loft. So he's getting the ball up in the air a little bit with a fade. So just something to keep in mind there. Poor rotations forces me then to flip, but not with wrists. I have good forward shaft lean. All right, you just confused me. You're not flipping, but you have great shaft lean. So you're saying you flip, but not with the wrists. But the flip feeling and look is over rolling the forearms to hit the ball solid. Well, that's not really a flip then. A flip, right? So, I mean, obviously you can come up with your own, because there's no like handbook that says flip is this, right? But it for me, if you're flipping, that is a wrist thing. Rolling over your arms is not flipping. So if you're coming into contact and you have shaft lean, but you're rolling over your arms, you should be rolling over your arms. That's not a problem. You should be rolling over your arms. Would keeping the club more square and less forearm rolling force me to square the club with better rotation? Pay, I really need to see your swing to know what's going on. Here would be my biggest piece of advice for you, because I think you're falling into the plight, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you're falling into the plight of many golfers. You're trying to look for something that's wrong with your swing, right? When what I would highly recommend that you do is look at your ball flight in contact and look at what the issues are there, and only make changes to your swing that improve your ball flight and contact, because that's all that really matters. Your forearm should absolutely be rotating through the swing. There's nobody that swings the club without forearm rotation. Everyone's rolling over their arms, right? You know, there are players that do it more or less than others, but everyone is rolling over their arms. So I wouldn't, Tiger Woods rolls his arms over. Rory McIlroy rolls his arms over. I mean, we're talking the most high-level golfers in the world are rolling their arms over. So I wouldn't necessarily say that is a problem. And also, poor rotation sounds like you have rotation, but it's maybe not as good as what you want, right? I get this all the time. I'll get students that come to me, I want to open up my hips more. I'll look at their swing. They're already opening up their hips, but they think that they're going to be looking like Dustin Johnson at impact. Well, that's not really in the cards for everyone. Not everyone's going to be that flexible, and you don't need to. That's the thing. You absolutely do not need to have your hips 70 degrees open at impact. If you look at, Tiger has his hips these days. Now, when he was younger, and he actually got to where, so if you look at really, really young Tiger, like amateur Tiger, he's at impact like this. Like his body is very, very open, and his arm is actually caught behind him a little bit. And Butch actually worked. There's like a viral video from a long time ago when he was like on some show on the Golf Channel or something like that. And they were interviewing him and Butch, and they were talking about how Butch was having him, he was actually rotating less, right? Because he was kind of getting his arm a little bit stuck behind him, and that can make you inaccurate at his level. That can make you not as accurate as you would like to be. So also, you don't want to. I would love to, if you wanted to work with me doing the online lessons, I'd love to help you to see what's going on. But I don't really see a problem with anything that you've talked about, right? If you're bowing the wrist at if you got the face in a good position at P6, then it's not really a problem. You can strengthen the grip a little bit if the face is still a little bit open at P6, and that can help you too. But if you're not flipping, then you're probably not. The face is probably in a good spot. If you're not actually like flipping with the wrists, rolling over your hands is not a problem. That is something that all the best players really do. So yeah, like I said, I would look at your ball flight and contact. And when I say ball flight and contact, what I'm talking about is Are you making good ball first contact, right? Are you hitting the ground? Are you not hitting the ground at all? Or are you not making ball first, hitting the ground behind the ball, too much in front? I would look at that. I would say that's fundamental number one. Number two is going to be center face contact. The reason why I say ball first contact is the number one thing is because none of the other pieces of contact really matter if you're not doing that. That's why I put that number one. And then strike location, I put number two because it has an effect on both your distance and your direction, right? So if we can get in your consistency from that standpoint. So if we're hitting the ball in the middle of the face, that would be number two. And then number three is going to be your face and path relationship, right? So are we getting the face in the path? And when I say the face, what I'm talking about is the direction the club face is pointing. Are we squaring up the face, right? So, nowhere in your question did you say that you're hooking or slicing the ball or that you're chunking or thinning. That's the way I would think about it is think about your ball flight and contact and then look at your swing to see how this is affecting your ball flight contact instead of looking at your swing and just trying to find things that, kind of overanalyzing the swing and trying to find things that might be wrong. Because what you may end up doing is you may end up working on something that's not actually a problem and you might make yourself worse for it, or you could have been spending that time on something that can actually make you better. And that, in a sense, is kind of making you worse as well. So think about your ball flight and contact and look at the swing in that way. I think you'll have a lot more success. So Aaron Z says, at the top of the backswing, trail wrist should be extended. Assume a strong grip. Yes, whether you have a strong or a weak grip, the trail wrist is going to be extended. When we're saying extended, that's so extended wrist means knuckles back, right? So you can see here, if I make a strong grip, this would be a very strong grip. If I go up to the top of the swing, my wrist is going to be extended, right? If I have a really weak grip, I go up to the top of the swing, my right wrist is going to be extended. So no matter whether you have a weak or a strong grip, your trail wrist is going to be extended at the top of the swing. All right, so Stuart P says, can you tell me if it's lead forearm or trail forearm that the club is following on the start of the downswing as per reference in the latest video tip? So I went over that, Stuart, in the very beginning of the office hours. The support contacted me and asked if I could go over that. Not sure if you saw that, but the short answer to the question is it's the trail arm. If you want to see the long form answer to the question after the office hours are over, you can go back and watch the archived office hours. For those of you who aren't familiar, we archive all the office hours, or I think it's up to the last 500 office hours because I think the playlist for YouTube only allows you to have up to 500 videos in your playlist. So I think we have over 500 in there now. So it kicks the oldest one out every single time. But to get to that, all you have to do is click the instruction tab at the top of the screen, then office hours highlights. Then you scroll down to the bottom of the office hours highlights page. You'll see the archived office hours, and you can see the long form answer to the question. It's actually a better way, a way that I like to look at it using the elbow plane line, and I explained that in the beginning of the office hours. But once the office hours are over, shortly after that, it will put the completed office hours in the playlist. All right, let's keep going. So George says, hi, Q. I'm wondering if you can review the trail elbow and hand approaching impact, at impact and through impact. I'm left-handed. Can you please explain for a lefty? So for a lefty, I'm just going to use trail arm, lead arm. I'm going to be explaining it in that way. But I'm not left-handed, so I can't demonstrate things left-handed, but I'll speak in terms that everyone can understand. But you may have to kind of mirror it for yourself. I understand it sucks sometimes being a lefty because you're kind of a minority. But unfortunately, that's just what I have to do because I can't demonstrate it left-handed. Hope you can understand. All right, so when we're talking about, so what was the actual question here? I lost track. So review the trail elbow and hand approaching impact, and 3 impact. So what I would think about, the easiest way to kind of think about this, and this is how I would actually recommend thinking about it, instead of thinking about like every little movement down to the how much the wrist is and how much it's bent and all that stuff. What I would think about is how you throw a ball, right? So if I were to throw a ball, I'm going to lead with my elbow. My wrist is going to be bent back, right? And I'm going to straighten it out and I'm going to let it go. That's the motion. It's really, I don't recommend thinking about it, like I said, in the sense of every little thing, because one, it's totally unnecessary to think about it that way. It's completely overcomplicates something that you just don't need to complicate, because when you're making a swing, you're not going to be able to think about, okay, right arm this, right wrist, or trail wrist this, trail arm this at every position. The golf swing is happening like that. I mean, it's the downswing is a split second, so you can't even think about those motions, right? But generally, what I like to see is trail arm at the top. I like to see it bent at about 90 degrees. That's what you're going to see with the best players. And just like if you're throwing a ball, you wouldn't bend your arm like this. That wouldn't be very powerful. And you wouldn't have it like this. Whenever anyone throws a ball, you're going to see them. They're going to bend their arm at about 90 degrees every single time, intuitively, right? So that's what we want to do with the golf club. We want to imagine like because that's really what you're doing. You're throwing the golf club into the ball, and then the ball is going toward the target, right? So that's kind of the way that you want to think about it, right? So trail arm about 90 degrees, right? Give or take is fine. Trail wrist is going to be extended back. The amount of extension in your trail wrist, it can vary, but generally it's going to be bent back about as much as you can, right? Around 60 degrees, right? Now, as I'm coming down, my trail arm is going to stay at that 90 degrees until about halfway down. A trail wrist again is going to stay at that 90 degrees that 60 degrees, close to that 60 degrees bent back until halfway down. From here, just like if I was throwing a ball, I'm going to move my elbow toward me, right? I'm move it. Now, some people have this idea that it's touching your body. It doesn't necessarily have to touch your body. It can, if you watch a baseball pitcher, right? If you watch somebody skip a rock, do they bring their arm to their body and then throw it? No, of course not. That wouldn't be as powerful. They move it closer to their body, but usually it never actually touches the body. So something to keep in mind, don't try to force your arm to touch your body, because that's most likely not going to put you in a good position and get you in there. Now, if you're feeling like it's touching your body, because that's a lot of what golf is. Golf is a game of adjusting your feel to get the desired result that you want. So if you feeling like it's touching your body is putting it in a great position, then by all means do that, right? But if you're literally trying to bring it in and it's actually touching, like this is not going to be very powerful. Imagine like being in a straitjacket, and or having like a chain around your body. Like this would not be very powerful, right? I want it to move, and I want it to move away. I want it to move in and then move away. That's what we do when we throw a ball. We move it in, then we move it away. That's going to allow you to be very powerful, right? So it's going to move toward your body, and then it's going to straighten out as we come into contact. As we come into contact, my trail wrist is typically going to have some bent back in it. Now, depending on how weak or strong your grip is, if you have a weaker grip, you're going to have more wrist extension in your trail wrist. If you have a stronger grip, you're typically going to have a little bit less. Depending on if you have like a super strong grip, if you have like a Matt Fitzpatrick kind of grip, your trail wrist might not be extended at all. It may be pretty flat at impact, depending on your grip. So keep that in mind, that it doesn't necessarily have to be extended back. But your trail arm is typically going to have a little bit of bend in it. There are some players that have it pretty straight, but generally it's going to have a little bit of bend. A lot of this depends on your flexibility. If you look at a player that's very flexible and they can bend their spine back a ton, they're typically going to have more bend in their arm because they're able to get down lower, right? But if you look at a player, maybe like, again, to bring up Tiger again, Tiger's trail arm is pretty straight, pretty close to straight at impact, and then it continues to straighten out as he releases it, right? So hopefully that makes sense with the wrist moves. If there's something else specific that you want me to talk about, I'll be happy to, but that's the way I would think about it is like skipping a rock or throwing. That's how I would think about it. All right, keep the questions coming. And just real quick, we do have I got some storms kind of rolling through. Actually, it doesn't look too bad that right now. But if I suddenly lose connection here, it's a possibility because of the storms rolling through. So. If you're just joining the office hours, I'm just waiting for a question to be asked. So if you got a question, now's a good time to ask. If not, no worries. If you're just jumping on the office hours, I'm just waiting for a question to be asked. So if you got a question, feel free to ask. If not, no worries. Bear with me here. As soon as I do this one little thing. All right, so we got a couple in here. So John says, hello, Q. What are the best daily at-home drills that I should be doing? Top speed golf system. Very simple. Top speed golf system. You can do the top speed golf system at home. Just work through the top speed golf system. That's it. I've been out of the game for a while. I've never had much of a problem hitting fades or draws with my irons, but I've always struggled to get a consistent draw with my driver. When I was playing a lot, practicing the top speed golf swing system, I did experience the power draw with my driver. Felt great, but it didn't last. Just work through the system, work through it at home. Yeah, that's what I'd recommend doing. George says, I just tried the throwing on my simulator. Wow, what a difference. Awesome. That's great to hear. Good to hear, George. Thanks for sharing. All right, we got about 20 minutes left here if anybody has any more questions. Leads me to another question. How much throw versus how much pull in a shot? It's really you're going to be doing both, right? You're doing both. So the way I would describe how the lead side works is like throwing a frisbee, right? So if I'm throwing a frisbee, right, my arm is going to I'm going to move into my chest into my arm, and then I'm going to move the chest or move the arm off my chest. It's very much. It's really you're doing them both. So they have to work together. No problem, John. Glad to help. All right, we got about 15 minutes left. If we have any more questions. So any plans for a mobile app? In the past, it seemed that the website worked better on a computer versus phone. Um, there's been talks of that in the past, but as far as I know right now, there isn't any plan to have a mobile app. But I'm also not involved with some of the the meetings on that. So it's very possible that they could be talking about it and I don't know about it. But as far as I know, there's no plan for a mobile app. But the website's pretty mobile friendly, so that might be why, because it is pretty mobile friendly. So um, so yeah. But as far as I know right now, no app is in the works. And if there was an app, it would probably just have like um, the main courses on it, like the Toss Golf system, the 20-minute shallow and fix, 20-minute distance fix. It would probably just have those courses on there, um, and not like every video that we come out with, like what's on the website. Um, so yeah, which I mean, that is the meat and potatoes of the website, right? Is the is the system in the courses and things like that. But some people are members for different reasons. Some people are members because they want they like those videos in their inbox every week. Um, and some golfers are, they're all about the courses and doing the courses. And I will say the golfers that are more about the courses and working through those tend to make better improvements. If you're looking at the one-off vault videos every single time, and that's all you're just kind of going to because I know there are people that just get a video and then they go to the range and they try it. And just every video, they just go to the range and they try it. And I don't really recommend that. It's not really a good plan of improvement. So I recommend, sticking to the system and the courses that, whatever my area as far as the courses are concerned. So if you're struggling with slicing the ball, 20-minute shallow fix. If you're struggling with distance, the 20-minute distance fix. If you just want to work on your overall swing, the Toss Golf system. You're struggling with your putting, the Toss Golf putting system. Working through things like that. All right, so John says, I was working through the videos back in 2020 and got my handicap almost down to scratch. Then COVID hit. I've been out of the game for a few years, but we'll try to make a commitment to start going through the Tuskegee Golf system again and get back into the game. Next goal will likely to get better than scratch. Takes a lot of work, though. Yeah, it definitely does. Takes a lot of work to get to that, and to even maintain it. You really have to get to plus levels to be kind of like a casual scratch. So like Clay, for example, Clay, doesn't play and practice as much as he used to, when he was younger. But Clay is kind of like he's still a plus, I believe, handicap, but I think he used to be like a +4, and now he's probably more like +1, +2. But makes him beatable every now and then. But yeah, that's sounds like you're on the right track. I just go get after it. But you got to put the work in. That's really what it comes down to. All right, we got not quite 10 minutes left. So if we have more questions, feel free to ask. If not, no worries. But yeah. So Jimmy G says, love the preview of the 20-minute posture fix. Clay talks about the hands on left leg at address. Okay, I get it, but sometimes having hand forward can cause you to pull the club inside. How do we guard against that with hands on left thighs? The hands forward makes you pull the club inside. I didn't know that. I mean, you just have to train it. I mean, if you're hands forward has been proven. They've done studies on it. It's been proven to help people to get into a better impact position, a more hands forward position at impact. Because this is, in my opinion, one of the things that, is kind of the plague of golfers. Because when we set up, right, when you first start playing golf, a lot of times when we set up, we're just trying to get into the most comfortable position possible, right? And most people, their eyes like symmetry. So what they'll do is they'll kind of set up like this, straight up and down. A lot of times they'll set up with the feet dead square, like everything is just, like this, and straight. Everything's kind of straight up and down, right? Well, when you do this, when you hold the club straight in front of you like this, you're going to tend to have a very weak grip. And when you have a very weak grip, it makes it difficult to come into contact with shaft lean and things like that. So if we get more tilt, let the hands be more forward, have a little bit stronger grip, generally people will have a much better impact position from this kind of setup, right? It doesn't mean that it's going to fix everything, but generally people come into a better impact position. So if that does help you come into well, the other thing to keep in mind is it's also not necessarily a bad thing to have an inside takeaway, right? That's the other thing we have to keep in mind. It's not necessarily a bad thing to have an inside takeaway. It's all about how you manage it. Raymond Floyd, inside takeaway. Sam Snead, inside takeaway. Matthew Fitzpatrick, inside takeaway. There's lots and lots and lots of elite level golfers that have inside takeaways. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. It can cause problems. I'm not going to say that, if you have an inside takeaway, you shouldn't try to fix it. It's all about how you manage it, right? So, for example, let's say I bring the club inside, right? And then, so this would be like how Raymond Floyd did it, right? He brought it inside, and then he brought it up like this, and then he shallowed it out nicely in the downswing. How some people do it is they'll bring it inside, and then the arms and everything start to go outside, and the club goes outside. So if you have an inside takeaway and you're doing this action, right, then it could be beneficial for you to feel more of a hands in, club out kind of takeaway, right, to get the club to shallow out, to get the momentum of the club working in the right direction. So it may just be something you need to train, right? And also keep in mind, you don't have to have your hands forward. It's just something that helps a lot of golfers. So, at that point, you can do you, right? But that's what it comes down to. On the takeaway when you begin the swing. Right, I understand that, but I'm just saying, like, well, one, I don't understand like how having the hands forward necessarily creates an inside takeaway, because there's lots of golfers that have their hands forward and don't have inside takeaways, and vice versa. There's golfers that have their hands straight in front of them and have inside takeaway. So, but if you're someone who comes into a great impact position with the hands forward and you have an inside takeaway and everything works great, then who cares if it's inside? It doesn't really matter. The golf ball does not care how you bring the club away. It only cares about how you're presenting the club to the ball at impact, right? So if you're bringing the club to the ball, like you're bringing it inside and then over the top, it could be worth training, more hands in, club out. You just have to train it. There's no magic pill I can give you to make you not bring the club inside. You have to train it. A drill that I like is a stick drill. So you take the alignment stick, put it down the shaft like this, right? Getting your setup. This also puts you in that hands forward position because you can't really have that club right in front of you with the stick there, right? And when you bring the club back, you just keep the stick on you, right? So it's going to stay on your hip. So you can see when I bring this club back, it stays on my hip. My hands go in, my club goes out, right? Now, if I were to have an inside takeaway, look where the stick goes. The stick moves away from my body. So this is a good way to kind of give you some feedback, right? To get in the right position. So Jimmy G says, would like to see Clay do some of the new posture fix drills using the divot board without a ball. Yeah, I mean, you can do it without the ball. I mean, I recommend using a ball with the divot board. At the very least, what you can do is take a piece of paper, because this is what I used to do when I was younger. I would rip up a piece of paper from my notebook and I just wad it up into a ball, and that would be my ball. And I would actually like set up targets in my bedroom, and I would try to hit stuff, like an old water bottle or something like that. Um, and the wadded up piece of paper, it doesn't damage anything. It doesn't. It's not going to damage your walls or anything like that. So I recommend that because then you're actually getting the sense of hitting something. Because if you just hit on the divot board, you can be leaving the face open. You could be, doing all kinds of stuff, right? So I recommend actually hitting something, but nothing's stopping you from using a divot board, doing the drills. Just use a divot board if you want. It's totally fine. All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll be back here tomorrow, Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern time. Everybody have a great rest of your Thursday, and I'll talk to y'all next time.